Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Pav Bamber here for PSB Sports, and on the phone with me, I've got trainer, Mr. Paddy Fitzpatrick. Paddy, thank you so much for talking to me. Paddy, how are you?
I'm very good, brother. No problem. How are you?
I'm doing very good, Paddy. I'm doing very good. I've been trying to get hold of you for a while, but finally we're here, Paddy. We're here.
That's all right. So long as we get there in the end, it's all good.
Exactly. So, Paddy, over the past, obviously, as you were training with George Groves, we're used to seeing you on, Sky Sports News or with Team Haymaker as well. How have you been, Paddy? Because you haven't been on TV much recently. We haven't really heard much from you. So how have you been?
Just doing what I'm doing. I'm always good, brother. I'm blessed to be doing what I'm doing. So I'm just building more talent up.
Fair enough. And how's your gym in Swindon going in Wiltshire?
It's bumping. It's been open 9 years, and thankfully it's always got stronger and stronger. Year in, year out, it's got stronger and stronger.
That's great to hear. And of course, you've got some young talent there in that gym, Paddy. Talk to you a bit about Luke the Duke Watkins, because I know he's had a few fights already. You're his trainer. Is it true, Paddy? Is he still managed by George Groves?
Just on paper, brother. George has never done any of his management. I've always done him. Duke has been with me for 8 years since he first put gloves on.
Okay,
so
right.
I take care of everything. I'm his manager.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to clear that up because I remember Sky Sports an article that George Groves is moving to managerial side of things, and he was managing Luke. So you're saying that you've been his manager since day one. It hasn't been George.
George is his manager on paper.
Right.
I've done everything, like I said. Duke is my fighter. I've had him from day one. I've done everything that you're supposed to be doing as a manager. And that's where that will be left.
Okay, fair enough. And obviously, has there been an announcement on Duke's next fight, Paddy?
Yeah, he fights in 2 days' time. He fights Friday night.
Is that in your call, Paddy, by any chance, by the way?
No, that's his next one. July 16th, he fights in York Hall, but he fights on Friday night here in Swindon.
Okay, sounds good. And Paddy, from a trainer's perspective, how do you see him progressing so far? Are you happy with the improvements you're seeing fight by fight?
Yeah, most definitely, brother. He's had 7 pro fights. Number 8 coming up Friday night. He's been with me since he very first put gloves on.
Yeah.
He probably only had around 15 amateur fights, but he's been with me 8 years.
Sure.
But the progression he's made now as a professional and the experience he's got from working with the various pros and sparring with the various pros he had is you can't beat that experience, and he's growing at the rate I would like, and I'm very content where he is.
Okay, sounds good. And I remember actually. You know what? I remember now. I tracked back. I saw him actually at the Blackwell Eubank Jr. fight. I remember. I didn't realize until afterwards. I was like, hang on a second. He looks familiar. I remember it was Luke Watkins. But yeah. So anyway,
I don't think he wasn't at the Blackwell Eubank fight.
Really? I don't know. He looked really familiar.
Must have been some other big black dude with a beard, but it wasn't Duke.
Yeah, fair enough. And also, Paddy, when can we sort of anticipate Duke, going for the British and Commonwealth, so on and so forth?
Well, he's ranked number 12 at the moment. The guy he's fighting on Friday night should bring him into the top 10.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of different avenues that are open for us to go.
Sure.
We're not in any rush. He's young. He's learning. He's got everything that I would like to see.
Yeah.
To be a successful fighter. And we're still in fights at the moment that's developing and bringing him through. I want to put him in a position that he's in somebody's way.
Right.
I'm not interested in making an agreement at the moment with any of the promoters because, as far as I'm concerned, you can either make an agreement early when you have less to sell,
right,
or get your fighter into a position that other fighters have no choice but to fight him, be that a mandatory position or whatever, and then you will get a better deal. And it's my job to get him as his manager to get him a better deal. So that's what we're doing. We're putting ourselves in a position to develop him as a fighter, and then to get him a good financial deal when that comes time.
Right. Okay. Sounds good. And Paddy, there's quite a few trainers and managers out there. You've got Adam Booth. I think you were in the Booth or Haymaker camp at some stage. I believe. How was that experience for you, Paddy, being at that camp?
I wasn't part of the Haymaker camp really. I had met Adam. I knew Adam a little bit from talking because I worked with David a little bit when he was an amateur, when he was going to be getting ready for the Olympics in 2000. I had come back from the States.
Right.
I got introduced to David through a mutual friend. I was down training some guys at his old amateur club, and the gentleman that used to run it, who's passed away now, said to me, "Would you mind doing a bit of work with that young guy over there?" And that young guy happened to be David. So
right.
I worked with David for a month and a bit, I think, and then I had to move on again. David obviously moved on, done his thing. When I came back, I got introduced to Adam through David.
Sure.
Me and Adam used to have lots of conversations on the phone about boxing. We would talk for a couple of hours at a time about boxing sometimes. And
sure.
I bumped into him up in Birmingham, and he said, "I got 2 fights that I'm going to sign tonight." He said one of them is George Groves against James DeGale,
yeah,
and the other one is David against one of the Klitschko's.
Wow.
And I said, "Well, I hope it's Vladimir." I said, because I think Vitaly will mug him in the corner within 3-4 rounds.
Right.
And he said, "Yeah, it is Vladimir." And he said to me, "What do you think about George against DeGale?" And I think technically George beats him. I just think it's emotionally if George can hold it together. I don't know George.
Sure.
So I don't know what his temperament is like, but if he can hold it together and stick to a very simple game plan, I said, I believe he has a beating of it. A week later, he called me up on the phone and he said, "Talk me through the fight. How do you see that fight going?"
Yep. And
I said, "I think you got to get him to watch Pereira against Prince Naseem." I said, "You got to counterpunch him. So you got to keep drawing James out, keep it simple, 2s and 3s, 1s and 2s, keep creating space so James can't let his hands go, and keep it a simple fight." That's how I got involved in that fight. He said, "Do you want to come up and do a little bit?" And I came up and done a little bit, and that was it. I wasn't really involved in the fight with David and Klitschko. He just asked me to come out on fight week, just to help him out with a few bits, and I did. So I wasn't part of their camp. I had my own gym down here. I just helped them out for that fight, and then I got back involved for the Glencoff Johnson fight.
Sounds good, Paddy. And Paddy, something I've got to ask you about is, you were involved in arguably 2 of the biggest British domestic fights for world titles we have ever seen. When George Groves fought Carl Froch, I mean, that quite literally captured the public's imagination. Because my mum, who has no interest whatsoever in boxing, as soon as she watched The Gloves Are Off, where Carl sort of pushed George over the table, that's it. She was hooked on that fight and she wanted to watch it. That rivalry captured so many people's imagination. And when you look back on that fight, do you ever think about it and think, "Wow, I can't believe I was involved in such an occasion"?
No, not whatsoever. I don't think about that about any fight that I've been involved in. So a fight is a fight. It's a big occasion after the event, I suppose, but I don't look back and think, "Oh, great, I was involved in that." I just look back at it as being a fight, and I probably look back at it with I don't look back at it with a smile, because we didn't get what we wanted out of it. We wanted the wins. We didn't get it in the first one because we believed that it was stopped too early, just, the same as a lot of people did.
Sure.
Not through any bad taste, just through, I just think the referee probably jumped in a bit too soon. And I think the reason the second fight was so big is because half of the people thought it was stopped at the right time, the other half of the people thought it was stopped too soon.
Right.
The second fight, I just look back and it gutted that George made that mistake in the 8th round, and kind of that's all she wrote, because I thought up until that point George was boxing beautifully. It was the plan in the second fight to have the first fight in the second half of the second fight. So to turn the second half of the second fight into a war, but to have the first fight, just keeping Carl with the jab and keeping him tentative with that and just building up some rounds. And I thought George was doing very well at that. And then we didn't get the win, so I was gutted for George then, and I'm still gutted for George now that we didn't get the win, and I'm also gutted for me as being part of it that the team didn't get the win. So no, I don't look back at that and think, oh great, I was involved in that fight, it was fantastic. We didn't get the win, so I only look back at it and I'm gutted.
Fair enough. And, you know, from a fan and as a journalist as well, out of the 17 rounds Carl and George boxed, I think universally the boxing world, most people would agree that George won the majority of those 17 rounds they boxed, which is fair enough. Although boxing is a subjective sport, the general opinion is that George won the majority of the 17 rounds. Paddy,
it still doesn't count. We didn't win the rounds that counted, which is getting the wins. So, Meldrick Taylor won the majority of the rounds against Cesar Chavez in their first fight, and then Chavez knocked him out with 10 seconds left. So who cares what happened up until then?
Yeah, I mean, of course, but the point I was trying to make is that Paddy, in the second fight, you're basically saying that you were trying to turn the second half of the fight into what the first half of the first fight was. What was your thinking behind that? Why? Because I remember at the time, Paddy, Glenn McCrory from Sky and a few other people were saying, why didn't George do what he did the first time because he was so successful? So what was your thinking behind turning the second half of the second fight into a war? What was your thinking behind that?
Well, Carl has always proved that what he doesn't necessarily make up for with finesse as a fighter, that Carl has got a granite chin. He's always in excellent condition.
Yeah.
He's got a huge pair of balls on him and a massive fighting heart.
Yeah.
So what he doesn't have in finesse, he has in every other aspect of the champion. And he has shown before against Meldrick Taylor, Jermaine Taylor,
yeah.
losing the majority of the rounds, and he still comes out. He never, ever loses that will to win. He can lose round after round, but as far as he's concerned, he'll get you sooner or later. So if we had gone into that second fight and started as quick as we did in the first one, Carl would have acclimatized to that emotionally a lot sooner, and then we could have been in a lot more trouble a lot earlier in that fight because emotionally he'd acclimatized to it. It was a shock to Carl in the first fight. It wouldn't have been a shock in the second fight. Going into the first fight, around 2 weeks before the fight, maybe 3 weeks before the fight, we were up in Dale Youth Gym, and I said to George, I said, I want you to tell Carl what you're going to do in the first round of the fight. And George looked at me like I had two heads. He goes, why am I going to tell him what we're going to do?
Yeah.
I said, because Carl isn't a quick starter. Chances are he's going to lose the first round anyway because he's not a quick starter.
Yeah.
You've got a better jab, better hand speed. If we go out there and keep it real simple the first round and just use the jabs and let go of one or two right hands, I said, we're not committing to no danger zone. We're keeping it simple. You're going to win the round, and he's going to have to believe that whatever you said about the rest of the fight, that you can pull it off. And he started chewing it over. He said he wasn't sure. He said, let me think about it. And I goes, okay, but to me, this isn't a gimmick. Everything I ask you do is for a reason. This isn't a gimmick. I said, the reason I'm asking you to do it is because psychologically, you're going to make that man realize that no matter what you said, he's going to pull it off. Then the day of the last press conference, we were coming out of our hotel rooms and we got in the lift together. And he said, I've been thinking about what you said. He said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell him that I'm going to just land, beat him with jabs and land that one right hand. And I knew then that he trusted me with the game plan for the fight.
Right.
And he did it, and he pulled it off, and I think that had a big psychological edge over Carl in that first fight. Going into the second fight, for the reasons I said earlier, that Carl would acclimatise emotionally quicker if we started quick, I said, he has no choice but to believe what you tell him now because you did what you said you were going to do in the first fight. So now what you should do is tell him you're going to knock him out in 3 rounds. In any interviews I get asked, I'm going to tell him, I'm going to say that I think you're going to do it in 5. I said that means we can get behind the jab, win the early rounds, not get involved in a tear-up, and he's going to expect something to happen after 3 rounds or after 4 or 5 rounds. He's going to expect it, so we're going to keep him in a box early on.
Okay.
And I believe it was working. It wasn't the exciting fight that everyone had in the first fight. That's the reason that they wanted it. But forget what Sky Sports was saying. Don't forget, Carl was a Sky fighter. George had signed with the Germans. George had gone and signed with the Sauerlands.
Yeah.
So he wasn't going to get no love of Sky Sports on that fight.
Yeah.
You turn the sound off to that fight. George won. Expired the 5th round. George won those first. He won round 1, 2, 3, and 4. I didn't. At the end of the 5th round, he came back to the corner. I said, "No good." He said, "Why not?" I said, "You went to the ropes. We have not trained for 3, 4 months, 5 months, whatever it is, for you to go to the ropes. Keep away from them ropes." He got back into the middle of the ring in the 6th round, was back on his stick again. Then at the end of the 6th round, I said, "Okay, you got to start nudging him back yet. Don't walk into the fire, but start doubling on that jab, nudging him back." And the plan was to turn it on in the 8th. He skidded around the edge of the ring in the 7th, but got away with it. He skidded around the edge of the ring in the 8th, and he got paid. But that's boxing. But that is the reason that we didn't jump on it straight away again, for all those reasons that I said. But what George did prove, even though he didn't get those wins, he proved that he's a world-class fighter. He deserves to be at that level. And he just hasn't got that world title yet. But he's got a big fight coming up now, and let's see how he does. I think it's a hard fight for him, but I wish him all the best for it.
Well said, Paddy. You know, it's certainly great to hear, you know, someone who is involved in that fight, you know, the trainer in particular, your perspective of how you wanted things to plan out and how they did plan out. But, okay, Paddy, let's move on now. 14, 15 months' time, George Groves beats Christopher Brass at Wembley Arena. He beats Douglin. He's mandatory now for Badou Jack. And, you know, it's a fight, you know, I mean, to be fair, Badou Jack is a fairly underrated champion. He's a good fighter, but it's a fight that, you know, I think the bookies had Groves' favourite, and also, you know, a lot of people thought that George would win. You know, although he got floored in the first round, he came back and boxed well for the next 6. And then, do you feel like it was the championship rounds in Vegas on the Mayweather card that Badou nicked them? Or they were 50-50 rounds, but it went to the home fighter. What was your plan in the Badou Jack fight? And once again, why do you feel like why do you think George was able to quite get the win? He was almost there.
Mentally, I don't think George saw Badou as a threat. Technically, he gave me everything I asked from the gym. Barry O'Connell, who is his conditioning coach, got personal best out of him in that camp.
Wow.
Dan, who was his strength coach, got personal best out of him. He was cold and vicious in sparring. He was hurting everyone in sparring. He was doing everything right and correct. I think George is the better fighter.
Yeah.
I think Badou Jack is very underrated. But a month before we went away to training camp in Big Bear, George come see me and it was a Sunday.
Okay.
And we sat down, we had a little get-together, a little meeting, and he said to me, "It annoys me that you think Badou Jack is a good fighter." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I don't know, it just annoys me that you think Badou Jack's a good fighter." And I said, "Well, Badou Jack's got excellent balance." I said, "He's got a very good jab, he feints well, and he understands distance." I said, "They are all the basic fundamentals." I said, "So he is a good fighter, and if it annoys you, you just got to suck it up, because it's not my job to make you complacent. It's my job to prepare you to win the world title."
Right.
He went, "Oh, okay," but it still annoyed him. So if you have a mentality, if you say to your coach, "It annoys me that you think Badou Jack is a good fighter," you got to have something wrong with you to turn around and get annoyed with your coach that he thinks your opponent's a good fighter. The coach is there to instill a certain level of a fear factor to get you to be sharp and get those little spidey senses tingling, man. You got to be switched on. And you ain't going to be switched on if you think it's a walk in the park. So when you find yourself then on your ass in the first round, and you're thinking, this dude who I thought was no good put me here, that doesn't then emotionally sit well with you.
Right.
So he went out, and rounds 2 to 7 then, he was boxing lovely. Round 8 he came back. I said, you look tired. That's no good. That's his round. You look real tired. Round 9 he come back. I said, that's another bad round. You're looking too tired. You're hanging out, man, and you ain't tired. I pointed at Barry O'Connell in the corner. I said, you've been breaking personal best for him up in Big Bear, and now you're acting like you're tired. I said, you ain't tired. I said, pull it together. Round 10 came back. He came back, and I stood and held the shape with the hands down, shoulders rolled, flagging, and I said, you look like I'm stood now. You look like you're hanging out your ass. I said, you got to pull this back together. That's 3 rounds on the trot. I said, you ain't tired. Stop acting like you're damn tired. And then round 11, I think he went out and boxed a lot better. And round 12, give or take. So at the end of that fight, split decision. Split decision anywhere else, he probably won it. But it doesn't matter. He didn't win it. He lost it. And it is what it is. So I knew after that fight, chewing everything over, if you're going to sit in front of your coach and tell him that it annoys me that you think the guy I'm fighting is a good fighter, our time is served, our time is done. And that's all she wrote. That's as far as I was concerned. I had been as much use to him as I could have been. I had gotten out of him as much as I could, and it was time for me to leave. He's with Shane now.
Yep.
Shane's an excellent coach. Hopefully a fresh mind. Hopefully to rejig him. When I say something about George that he has in abundance, I think it's my belief that the reason that he ended up on his ass in that first round was, yes, Badou Jack is a good fighter, but I think George Coles is a better fighter. But he went in there and mentally complacent. Because if you actually think you're a lot better than your opponent, that's one thing. To actually say, I'm annoyed that you think he's better, that's totally different. But so complacency did not help him in that fight. But when George Groves is up against it, there is no better man to step up to the plate. And the Rabassi fight is a great example of that, because George chose to go back to Wembley.
Yeah.
He didn't choose to have a little 8-round fight. He chose to take on the European champion just after getting knocked out half a mile across the road, and he didn't get enough respect for that win because he dominated that fight. He threw 1,000 punches. He probably lost a couple of rounds, and since that fight, Rabassi has given Callum Smith, who I think is an excellent fighter, and he's given Callum Smith all he could handle in that fight. That wasn't one of Callum's better wins. He gave Callum all he could handle. There's argument to say he probably beat Rocky Fielding. Rocky, he probably got a little bit of an injustice on that decision. Now, Christopher Brassi is a far better fighter than he's given credit for. I don't think necessarily he's world champion material, but he's one of those men that will test the best men out there. He will test anyone that he's put in there against. And George, before that fight, you got to think about it. He's just got knocked out in such a huge fight that he drew so much attention to that fight. That was down to George. Yes, it's solely because of the dynamics between the two and because of what happened in the first one. But George really put a lot of effort into selling that fight. What happened, and he's got the balls to go back half a mile across the road, take on a champion, and dominate that. And I'm telling you, at the end of the first round, George was exhausted because emotionally it took him so much to hold himself together. But that's why I'm saying, George, when it is time to step up, when he thinks, I've got it all to lose here, there is no better man to step up. No better man out there. I think I've got massive respect for him when it comes to that.
Great words there, Paddy. Great words. And I'm not gonna lie, Paddy, as well. I remember when I heard Groves was fighting with Brass and he was fighting at Wembley. I thought, wow. I mean, this guy must be very mentally strong to go back, literally across the road from where he was knocked out at Wembley, and fight there once again. I mean, as you said, it took some balls and it took some mental strength for him to go back to just Wembley a couple months later and fight again, Paddy.
Do you know what? Balls is one thing, but balls won't give you composure. George is excellent at keeping that composure and hiding how he's feeling when
Right.
it comes crunch time. And he does love a challenge.
Sure.
He does love that challenge. He loves that excitement, that challenge. And listen, how many people after getting knocked out would then? I said to him, he said, I just need to be back in a real fight, coach. I'm gonna get a few names together. I'll get around 3 names together. Have a look. You tell me which one you want. He said, but I want to be in a real fight. He said, I was winning that last fight. I don't need to be flipping wrapped up in cotton wool. I want to be in a real fight.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted him then to get some hard sparring so that he would be able to tick a few boxes for himself before fight time. And I thought, no matter who we get to spar back in England, even though there's lots of excellent fighters that we could have got to spar, in George's mind, it still would have been, yeah, but he's a dude from back home. Who cares? That doesn't mean nothing to me.
Sure.
I didn't think there would be any big enough name in Europe for him to be able to tick the boxes that I wanted him to. He had to have a name that people would be like, flipping out, and that he himself would be like, flipping out. So I said to him, look, I want to take you to the States. I know Tom Loeffler. Let me give Tom a call. Let's go over and get some sparring with Golovkin.
Wow.
And he didn't even flinch. Now you got to think about this. George, after losing that fight, he took a liking to chocolate for a little bit. So he put on a little bit of weight. He wasn't in the best of shape. We went to training camp, and he straight away stepped in and sparred 2 days with Golovkin. Now, you're a world-class fighter, you expect that, but I'm saying that he relished the idea of doing it. And
Right.
and Kennedy was only 2 weeks away from a fight. So Kennedy was on his game, sharp, in shape, trim, timing beautiful, everything ready. George knew he wasn't in good shape. He was carrying too much weight, but he still had that about him. He's got that mental toughness about him.
Sure.
And he went up there and he did a good job too.
Oh yeah, I mean, literally, my follow-up question to that, Paddy, was going to be, from your perspective, how did that spar go with George and Golovkin?
It went very good. I told him after the first day. They did 4 rounds the first day, and they did 3 rounds the next day because George got his rib broken the second day.
Oh.
But the first day that they sparred, they both did very well. I said to George, when the bell goes, don't move around the outside this ring. I said, because I know you like to. But I said, Gendy Golovkin will just take that free space. I said, and by the second round, you'll have nowhere to go.
Right.
I said, the second that bell goes, just walk straight across the ring, straight up inside, and get inside straight away. That'll be almost a little bit of a mental shock to him. He's not gonna get busy throwing a whole heap of shots straight away. He's gonna respect your power. He's not gonna want to get into too big a tear up. He's fighting in 2 weeks' time.
Okay.
So put yourself straight in his face. Don't move on this man. Now, again, fair play to him. The bell went, he walked straight out, straight up inside. The two of them worked almost in the center of the ring for 4 rounds. At the end of the day, there's no way that didn't benefit George. George felt, okay, I've come off the loss, but I've got in. I know I'm not in shape. I know he's in great shape. I've just got in and done 4 rounds with everyone is saying is the beast in boxing right now.
Right.
I said to George, they're planning to start it the very next day. I said to George, he done a lot of research today. He didn't necessarily take advantage of all the openings that he saw. I could see Kennedy looking at stuff, just touching George there, but not letting go hard. I said, tomorrow's going to be your last spar because that's what Abel Sanchez had said. He said, I'll spar one more day. So I knew that tomorrow, that the next day, the homes and the little holes that Kennedy had seen, he was going to start putting something between them now and pick it up. They were doing 4-minute rounds with, I think, 30-second rest. It might have been, I might be around there, might have been a minute rest, but I think it was 30-second rest. But we do 30-second rest in my gym anyway, so he was used to that, but it was 4-minute rounds.
Okay.
They went out. Before we started the spar, Abel Sanchez has all these fighters wear these like American rugby protector around their abdominals, the last 3 weeks before fight time. And he had said, Paddy, do you want George to wear this? And I said to George, you fancy putting this on? He was like, no, I don't really want that on. And I said, okay, I'll just leave it up to him. So that's fine. So we left that off. They went inside. Again, George was boxing beautifully. I mean, they were both boxing lovely, but George, make no mistake, he was boxing beautifully and he was right there. But then round 2 come, Kennedy slotted in some really hard shots. That was all right. George took them well and replied beautifully. Round 3 going on, Kennedy sunk a couple in, and you could tell that George, he didn't show it, but I could tell from being with him every day that something wasn't right.
Right.
But he still boxed beautifully. Finished round, didn't say a thing. But as soon as the bell went for the 3rd round, he just walked over and got out. And as he was passing me by, getting out through the ropes, he goes, "My rib's done."
Oh, right. Okay.
And I just looked over at Abel Sanchez and goes, "That'll do us, man. That's cool." And they said, "Okay, thank you." And that was it. And his rib was done. But listen, anyone could break a rib. Again, George's composure, George's attitude, all of that, he showed pure class. Pure class.
Really, really good to hear. I mean, George going out there to spar Golovkin 2 weeks before a fight, went in there, as you said, out of shape, did 7 rounds with him. That is solid stuff, Paddy. Paddy,
it's because he was coming off the loss. It's because it was off the loss and because he was out of shape. There was a lot of factors. If he was in shape and he wasn't coming off the loss, I wouldn't think nothing of it. I'd think, well, I suppose it doesn't. Of course, you're supposed to spar him. It doesn't matter how good Golovkin is. You're a super middleweight. He's a middleweight. He's a world champion. You're world class. It's no big deal. It's education. Let's go spar him. But the fact that he was coming off the type of loss he was, because Kennedy has that little aura about him that Tyson used to have when he was in the gyms. You heard when Mike Tyson was coming through what he used to be doing to people. And Golovkin has that kind of little aura about him.
right.
People know what he's like. They know how dangerous he is. They know he's a vicious puncher. And for all those factors, the loss, who Kennedy was, George being out of shape, and he relished it. When I said I want us to go over and spar with Kennedy, he was like, cool, call Tom, see if you can make it happen.
Yeah.
He was great. He was up for it. I mean, when he's up against it, like I said, there's no better man. But he's in a real hard fight now, this next fight, because
Martin Murray.
It doesn't matter that he says, he'll retire Martin Murray. If he loses, I think George going to retire too. I don't think either man has anywhere to go if they lose.
Who do you think wins that fight, Paddy? Groves Murray?
I think that's a 50-50 fight, and I really do, because if you think George against Christopher Brassi, that was 1,000 punches. George was busy from the start of the fight till the end.
Sure.
And looking back on that win now, when you now that you've seen Christoph against Callum Smith and against Rocky Phelan, now all of a sudden people are actually recognising that Christopher Brassi is a better fighter than they gave him credit for when George fought him. Because they just wanted, again, it was on Sky Sports. He wasn't going to get no love. But Christoph likes to box long, and George has got probably one of the best jabs in boxing, period, in any weight division. He probably has one of the best, most spiteful, most educated jabs in boxing. He has always had that jab. And against Christoph, playing the long game and going inside for the odd bit, that was no problem, because he was able to go inside almost of his own accord. But against Martin Murray, Martin will be more comfortable inside than George. Now, Martin has got to get inside. And against somebody like George with that jab and that power and that right hand, that's a big ask. But Martin himself, he's no weak man physically or mentally. And even though you'll always take more confidence from a win, there's certain fights where you will take confidence even though you lost.
Sure.
And even though Martin Murray will be chewing a wasp and pissed off that he didn't beat Golovkin too, because that's the attitude you'd want of him, because he went in there to beat him. He didn't go in there to take part in the fight. He went in there to beat Golovkin. But the fact that he went 10 or 11 rounds, whatever it is, with Golovkin, and he knows that he can take that type of power and still not try to survive, still have that desire to actually want to still win. He was like, Martin never was in that fight with Golovkin trying to survive. He was always in there trying to win, even though he didn't, even though he took a lot of shots. That toughness and that desire was always there. So I think mentally that toughness and desire, I don't think George has the edge there. I think they're both power on each other. Outside, long, that jab, that nice long right hand, George has got that edge. Inside, physically bullying him, working to the body because he's more comfortable there, I think Martin Murray has the edge. So that is very much a 50-50 fight, and it'll be very interesting to see how it changes after 5 to 6 rounds. How Martin doesn't necessarily have to win the early rounds, but he doesn't necessarily have to try and charge past George's jab either. He just has to negate George's jab. He just has to be able to jab with George a few times, negate him, and make George work a little bit more than he might want to work. And it'll be interesting to see what happens after that 5th to 6th round. Like I said, that whole fight could take a shift. It's an excellent, excellent, excellent fight. It's probably one of our best matchups for years. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll be really looking forward to that fight, and I have been since it's been announced, because I think it's two excellent men, two world-class men. Arguably, they should be world champions already. And both of them know, no matter what, no matter if George is going, Murray has to retire. They both know whichever one of them loses, retire. And because of that, you're going to see the best of both men. And it's going to be an excellent, excellent night for British boxing.
Absolutely, I agree. It's going to be a great fight on a great card. Paddy, I want to say thank you so much for giving me 42 minutes of your time now, Paddy. Thank you so much. And, I hope to speak to you. And I was going to say that hopefully I can speak to you again soon. And once again, thank you so much for your time.
Keep smiling. God bless, brother.
Thanks a lot, Paddy. All the best. This has been Pav Bamber here.
Bye.
Pav Bamber for PSP Sports with Paddy Fitzpatrick. Thank you very much for listening.